A number that can be written as a fraction can also be written as a decimal. Similarly, a number that is written as a fraction can be rewritten as a decimal, and a number that's written as a decimal can be rewritten as a fraction. It's important to understand the relationship between these two. Many times you will see problems that present us with both fractions and decimals. For example, if we had a problem like, which is further, 0.56 miles or 6/8 of a mile, we need to be able to convert these numbers from one form to another. And for these, it's easier to work with one form. And so to solve them, we must be able to convert from decimals to fractions and from fractions to decimals. The first problem that we're going to look at in our decimals and fractions is a problem in which we're asked to convert a decimal to a fraction. So it says convert 2.11 to a fraction. And so to convert a decimal to a fraction, we simply need to read the decimal aloud. So 2.11 can be read as 2 and 11 hundredths. If we were to write this as a fraction, it would look then like 2 and 11 hundredths. And it would also be read as 2 and 11 hundredths. This is the simplest way to convert between a decimal and a fraction. Let's take a look at another example. We are asked to convert 5.25 to a simplified fraction. And sometimes the fractional equivalent of a decimal can be simplified. And that's going to be the case in this problem. So 5.25 can be read as 5 and 25 hundredths. And I have this now, 5.25, from decimal to fraction. However, I can see that both my 25 and my 100 are divisible by 25, so I can simplify the fractional portion of my answer. So my 25 over 100 can be simplified by dividing both my numerator and denominator by 25. So if I divide this by 25 here in the numerator and the denominator by 25, I end up with my simplified fraction of 25 divided by 25 equals 1 in my numerator, and 100 divided by 25 equals 4 in my denominator. So the simplified form of 25 100ths is 1/4. So I can do that in my solution here and make a simplified fraction. So 5.25 is equal to 5 and 25 hundredths, which is simplified to 5 and 1/4. We're now going to look at a problem in which we convert a fraction to a decimal. Converting fractions to decimals can be really simple when the denominator of our fraction is a multiple of 10. So our problem says to convert 6 and 777 over 1,000 to a decimal. So our fraction here can be read as 6 and 777 thousandths. And as we remember from our decimals, we've got our ones place here to the left of our decimal point, and then we've got the first position here to the right of our decimal is our tenths place. The second position is our hundredths place, and the third position here is our thousandths place. And so in our problem, since we've got thousandths as our denominator, we know that we are going to go over here 3 positions to the right of our decimal point for our decimal. So what we want to do here is we want to keep our whole number, 6, to the left of our decimal point, and then we've got the decimal. And then we take our 777 and we put them here in the positions to the right of the decimal. And so 6 and 777 thousandths can be converted to a decimal and will look just like this, 6.77 2.777. Let's take a look at a problem in which we need to convert a fraction to a decimal, but the denominator of our fraction is not a multiple of 10. So in this example, find a decimal equivalent to 2 3/4. So our denominator here, this 4, is not a multiple of 10. So we can't do the simple way of converting that we just looked at. We have to do a little bit more work in a problem like this. So fractions with denominators that are not a multiple of 10 can also be written as decimals, but they require a little extra step. So if we have 2 and then 3/4, we read it as 2 3/4. The whole number 2 is still going to go to the left of our decimal point, but since there's no fourths place in the decimal values, we must convert this 3/4 to a decimal. So we can do it one of two ways. The first way is that we can take the 3/4 and we can look at it as a division problem of 3 divided by 4. And we can do the division on this, and the answer to our division problem is going to be the equivalent of 3/4. So let's look at what happens when we do 3 divided by 4 using our long division. So I need to make my 3 here, that's a whole number, into a decimal by putting a decimal point after my whole number, and I'm going to add a couple of zeros afterwards. So now I start my division problem here at 30. So 30 divided by 4. First, before I start my division, I always want to take my decimal point in the dividend here and move it up to where it's going to be in my answer, or in my quotient. So now I can begin. I've got 30 divided by 4, which is 7. And so my 7 goes here. 7 times 4 equals 28. And I write that below. Subtract, and I have a remainder of 2. 30 minus 28 is 2. So I bring my 0 down here. And now I've got 20 divided by 4 equals 5. I place my 5 right here. 5 times 4 equals 20. Subtract 20 minus 20 equals 0. No remainder, so I'm finished with my long division problem. And this 0.75 then is the conversion of 3/4, the fraction, to a decimal, 0.75. So I would write my answer then as 2 for my whole number, stays to the left of my decimal point, and then my 0.75 answer here of the 3/4 converted to a decimal goes to the right of my decimal point, and my answer is 2.75. I found that by dividing 3 divided by 4. The second way that I can do that is I can convert my denominator to a multiple of 10. So let's leave our answer there, 2.75, and let's look at it another method, and we'll get the same answer. So if I have, again, 2 3/4, now I'm just going to look at the 3/4 portion of it, because I already know that my 2 is going to be my whole number, and my 2 is going to be the one number here to the left of my decimal point. But another way of finding the decimal equivalent of the fraction 3/4 is to convert the denominator to a multiple of 10. So when I look at this denominator here of 4, I can see that if I multiply 4 by 25, I will get 100, which is a multiple of 10. So this 4 here, if I multiply by 25, and I multiply my numerator also by 25, then I end up with 3 times 25 equals 75, and 4 times 25 equals 100. And so now I have 3/4 equivalent fraction is 75 over 100, because I just multiplied by 25 over 25, which is the same as multiplying by 1. because any number over itself equals 1. So 75 1/100ths is an equivalent fraction to 3/4. And now that I have my fraction in a multiple of 10, I can convert to the decimal using my method of, I've got my whole number to the left and then my decimal point. My first position after the decimal point is going to be my tenths place, and the second position after my decimal point is going to be my hundredths place. And since this is, my 2 is my whole number here that I'm going to put to the left, and then my decimal point, and then since this is 75 1/100ths, I know that this is my 100ths place here, my tenths place here, so I'm going to do my 7 here and my 5 here, and I have the same answer as I came up with when I divided 3 by 4 in this conversion method, and I have 2.75 or 2 75/100ths. Sometimes a fraction cannot convert easily to decimal form. Let's take a look at this, for example. Find a decimal equivalent to 1/3. So we're going to begin by dividing 1 divided by 3 and see what kind of answer we come up with. So 1 divided by 3, and I need to make my 1, my quotient, into a decimal here by adding a decimal point after my whole number and a few zeros afterwards. So I'll start here, bring my decimal point up to where it belongs in the quotient, and begin with 10 divided by 3. So 10 divided by 3 equals 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. And so I have a remainder, so I need to bring down a 0 here. And I again have 10 divided by 3. 10 divided by 3 equals 3, so I put my answer here. 3 times 3 equals 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Oh, I have another remainder of 1, so I'm going to bring down another 0. Let's see what happens. I'm at 10 divided by 3 again, which equals 3. And 3 times 3 equals 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. And as you can see, this pattern is going to repeat over and over and over again. And you can see that this division never ends. The only way to truly express 1/3 in a decimal equivalent would require an infinite number of 3's after my decimal point. So if I were to put this answer as 0.3, that would be close. 0.33 would be closer. 0.333 would be closer still. But the problem is that this pattern would need to continue forever in order to truly equal 1/3. And so to symbolize this repeating pattern, what we do, erase this here and just write our answer right here. What we do then for these is to symbolize the repeating pattern of the 3's after my decimal point. I write a 3, and then I put a little horizontal bar above the 3. And that little bar there above my 3 symbolizes that this 3 to the right of the decimal point goes on and on forever in order to truly equal 1/3. So with this as my answer, it is an approximation of 1/3, but it is sufficient for most of the problems that you do with fractions and decimals. So we can leave our answer like this: 1/3 is equal to 0.3 repeating. So let's take a look at a problem that we mentioned earlier. Which is farther, 0.56 miles or 6/8 miles? So we either need to convert both of these to decimals, or convert this one to a decimal so that they're both decimals, or we need to convert this one to a fraction so that they're both fractions, and then do the comparison. So if we convert our 0.56 to a fraction using the method that we did from an earlier example, we would have 0.56, which is the same as 56 hundredths, and we could convert that then to 56 over 100. And similarly, if we wanted to convert the 6/8 to a decimal so that we can compare the two, we could do 6 divided by 8 and do a long division problem. So let's do that over here and see what we get for 6/8 or 6 divided by 8. So if I'm going to take my 6, divide that by 8, then I want to turn my dividend here into a decimal by putting a decimal point after my whole number and some zeros after that. And then I take and make sure that I put a decimal up in where my answer is going to be, up in my quotient, and I put the decimal right above the decimal of the dividend. And I get to work. So 60 divided by 8 is 7. So I place my 7 here. 7 times 8 equals 56. And I subtract. 60 minus 56 is 4. So I have a remainder of 4. I need to bring my 0 down. And so 40 divided by 8 equals 5. And I place my 5 here. And I have then 5 times 8 equals 40. 40 minus 40 equals 0. No remainder, so I am finished. And so I have the decimal equivalent of 6 over 8, or 6/8, is 0.75. So now I can compare and I can see that 0.75 or 6/8 is greater than 0.56. If I want to look at another example of doing this, I could take the technique where I line up my 56 over 100 and my 6 over 8, and I do the cross multiply check to see which one of my fractions is larger. So I can multiply 56 times 8, so I've got 56 times 8, compared to, and then I multiply 100 times 6. And that cross multiplies here, 56 times 8 and 100 times 6. So I know that 56 times 8 is less than 100 times 6, which tells me that 56 over 100 is less than 6 over 8. And so again, I can see that my 0.56 miles, or 56 100ths, is less than 6/8. And it's the same answer I got when I looked at them as decimals and could see that 0.56 is less than 0.75. So two different methods of doing this, both put me in the same, give me the same answer of 6/8 miles is greater than 0.56 miles.